It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! It's Feedback Friday. And were you singing along, Delilah? Delilah? Were you singing along? Do you want to come say hi? No? You sure? This is not what you guys signed on for. Sorry about that. Oh, hi, Zelda. Why is everyone coming in right as I start recording? This is the kind of chaos in my house. I've been at this computer all day. I'm recording this Thursday night, just online meetings and podcasts and everything like that. It's been freaking crazy, so I apologize. I am super tired. You can see how greasy I am. I should have powdered before I did this, but I'm almost done. No, that's the back of my chair. Oh my God, I'm confusing the back of my chair for a cat. Okay. Leanna I'm in that introvert overload period. We're just talking to so many people, being around so many people. Thank you guys for the kind words on my personal situation. I'll leave it there. Introvert, that video, that's my one and done. Thank you all for the kind words. I just don't do family stuff in public well. So moving on. It was an interesting week in that the thing that seemed to do the most good for the people, like in person-to-person intensity, the thing people found the most useful was the video on life skills, about how to apologize and things like that. Of course, YouTube's algorithm, that isn't clickable. That isn't, oh my God, drama, click. So yet another thing that reminds me I should be doing podcasts on this stuff. The video on Noah Bertlatsky and the misogyny and all that stuff, and the article on Gamergate, the comments were really interesting. Obviously, I can't go through it. It's funny because Kathy Young shared the video, and she says, hey, it's great. I don't agree on everything, but it's great. And I thought that was kind of a beautiful thing, because it was such a sharp contrast between the way Noah Bertlatsky handled disagreement and the way Kathy and I handled disagreement. Like, no two people are going to agree on everything. It's just impossible. Like identical twins don't agree with everything. If people seem to agree on everything, someone is lying. Someone is oppressing their real opinion. And, I forgot to do one of the things that people really did not like was the Saints Go Marching In for a Patreon song. So I changed it. I tried it out on Twitch. And I have a new one. Ready? Here we go. Patreon. You become a member. Patreon. 'Cause YouTube is annoying. Patreon. I don't know what else to say. Patreon. There we go. I'll work on that. But that's a little catchier, isn't it? Patreon. You will become a member. Patreon. No, that's too demanding. You will become a member? You should become. Yeah. Patreon. You should become a member. Patreon. 'Cause YouTube is so stupid. Patreon. No. I shouldn't call YouTube stupid. I'll keep working on it. That was a reason to repeat it over and over and over again. And basically be goofy because I am tired. This is the theater training kicking in, which the patrons saw some theatrical stuff I did. I'll be coy about that. But if you become a patron, you will get access to what I'm talking about right now. But that's the theater training. The more tired I am, the more jazz hands crazy you push it. Because believe it or not, again, introvert, I was really shy as a kid. And so I'd curl into myself in public. So they're like, no, shoulders wide, power pose. And that's a liability for me in my current anatomy, but you get what I mean? And so, stand up straighter, speak louder, be more animated when you're tired. Like, bring it! Dance. You seem energized even when you're freaking tired. But it was interesting, the people from, as they called the anti-social justice side of things, or, of which Gamergate is a part of. Some of the people that commented on that, I didn't know that was their spin. That was their sort of self-identifier. Really surprised me that they identify that way, because I would not have guessed. They seem quite progressive by the comments they've left in the past. But one of the people that commented and was brave enough to admit they supported Gamergate in a public forum. I'll say their name because they put it there, and I said I'd give kudos to the people with good comments. So kudos to Karmakin. And again, this takes guts. It takes some. If you don't come across like a slavering lunatic, like the people that still wanted to argue Game Journal's pros in comments, it takes guts to be, a seemingly rational, reasonable person and still identify as supportive of Gamergate, because it gets you nothing. Okay, like it doesn't. There's no benefit to that. So I appreciate people who do stuff like this, even if it's under an alias. It's a persistent online alias, right? So I want to credit people for that. It encourages dialogue, and I think that the people that have a bad opinion of that whole crap storm, which I totally understand as well, I think some more nuance would be beneficial there. So let me read Karmakin's comment. In the video, Liana says something to the fact that, Noah Bertlatsky has his destination, is just looking for a path to get there. And I think that's totally correct. I'm going to give credit here to James Lindsay on Twitter. He's been promoting some ideas that I think are essential to this stuff, and act as revolutions. I think of my own thoughts. I don't know anything about this. I'm just reading the comment. What James says is, in these circles, there's basically a set of concepts of ideas. He calls it theory in these pop progressive circles. The capital C is important here. The capital C? Capital T. I think it is theory, capital T. The main part of that theory is that it's absolutely true. 100%, no exceptions. Everything Bertlatsky says in his article is 100% based on theory. There's no real evidence here, no receipts, unlike Kathy Young. Because if it fits theory, it must be true. I think that's largely what's going on here, but a few more comments. As someone tied into anti-SJW culture, of which GG is a part, Gamergate, nobody is really saying there was no harassment coming from GG. That's not the question. The question is if it's unique. It's the double standard. It's okay if other movements engage in this sort of harassment, but it's wrong if other people do that. That's the issue. And yes, I think it's okay to argue that some movements have more ... value than others, but that means we have to debate these things on the merit. I strongly believe that a lot of the media response was a bit of a freak out about perceiving demands to check their privilege for what it's worth. I supported GG and lean supporting still, to be honest, to put it bluntly, but the reason I did, quite frankly, is that I heavily oppose the culture that stems from that theory set I talked about above. I believe it's heavily misogynistic and racist and misandric as well, I should add. It's just hateful and objectifying, I think, all the way around, and abusive, quite frankly. I don't want any part of that culture. I don't mind if other people have it, but the attitude that culture has to envelope everything is something that does heavily concern me. The idea that everything non-progressive is bad and horrible, well, yeah, I think that has to be pushed back against. I'm also a feminist, or at least I would identify as such. I do not see this pop progressive culture and their theory model as anything close to such. I don't think it is fit for use to solve the issues facing women, and in fact, I think they're making them worse. That is something from somebody who identifies as leaning pro-Gamergate, which is why, and then that other guy responded, and I thought this was an interesting back and forth. That other guy, that's actually the user's name, says, quote, "Nobody is really saying there was no harassment coming from GG. That's not the question. The question is if it's unique." Being there myself at the time, I think the question was more how much harassment was coming from GG, because anti-GG, GG means Gamergate, seemed to be unwilling or incapable of accepting the idea that trolls were making things worse. All it took was for an anime avatar or egg avatar to go, you suck, #Gamergate. So you suck, #Gamergate, for it to be called Gamergate harassment. Nothing else was required for it to be attributed to Gamergate. Well, on the other side, outright threats of violence were dismissed by the media or justified. It was so uneven as to be laughable, like two hockey teams trying to play one another, where one team was fully outfitted by professionals and the other team didn't even have skates. It's astounding that Gamergate was able to do as much as it did. As for the theory you mentioned, I don't disagree. I think Lindsay is reading too much into it. That's what academics do, unfortunately. They think more deeply into things than the rest of us simply take for granted. So that was an interesting back and forth, two perspectives that were basically sort of saying the same thing. I will say that there were some people in Gamergate who denied there was any harassment. Now, I'm not saying those are the most reasonable people in Gamergate, but there were some people who are just like, nope, didn't happen, all third-party trolls. That's not true. I got some of it. What's interesting is the people that came at me all swears and anger, once I talked to them and calmed them down, some of them still watch his channel. Like, that's what's interesting. And this is where I get into my definition of harassment versus what the standard internet version of harassment is. I don't think somebody being angry and coming at someone hard is harassment, even if they're swearing. I think people get angry. Anger is a valid emotion, and I don't want to minimize people's feelings. I just noticed my mic is a bit low. I apologize. But I don't like minimizing people's feelings that way. If somebody comes at me hot and I say, look, I'm happy to talk to you, but you got to take it down a peg or 6, and they do it, I don't consider that harassment. That's an upset person. We all have it happen, right? If somebody continues to just rah, 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 curse and swear, you shill, this, that, the next thing, a whole bunch of words I will repeat, now that's a problem. And I don't even consider that harassment. That's somebody who can't get it together. That's what the mute button is for, right? If someone keeps on you and on you and on you, or if it's an organized dog pile on someone, in internet parlance at the time, like one of the big things that was this huge debate point, I'm not kidding, during Gamergate, is what was considered a dog pile and what was considered a brigade. And dog piles were considered to sort of happen organically. People just got outraged and went, "Bruh," so they all piled on. A brigade was something that was like organized on a subreddit or a message board, and it was like this concerted effort to all go at someone at once. The distinction was made. And it was true that there are multiple groups still just bombarding people with anger over opinions and things that they don't like. And I think that, this is a tough one because there's no way to eliminate dog piles. There are just going to be certain things, especially if it's misreported in the media or signal boosted by somebody with a large following. I'm very careful about this for that reason. I've learned my lesson in a few cases. Dog piles happen. They suck when they happen. If you're in the public eye, there's something you have to learn to deal with. Now, the thing about a dog pile is people will get really upset. In about 72 hours, it'll calm down. There'll be a few people who are still angry, but life will go back to normal. If it's a concerted effort to make someone miserable, it does not stop. And that's when things really start eroding a developer or a public figure's mental health. And this is part of the reason I'm doing the life skills thing. You may notice I'm pretty tough. I do not respond to just a bunch of people being super angry at me. The whole Mortal Kombat fiasco of a few months back is an example of this. If somebody makes a valid point, then that is powerful to me. Like if somebody says, look, this is the thing you're not factoring in, that's valid. Sometimes things are received in a way you don't intend to communicate them. And it's important to learn from that so that, you can communicate your message effectively to the largest group of people. One person to me making a valid point, like the 4 people who are like, oh God, I have so many bad associations with the Saints Go Marching In. That you'll notice that has more of an impact on me than thousands of people telling me off the way the Mortal Kombat thing happened. I do not bow to outrage. I change things based on solid arguments. And I think that's extremely important. And this ties into another question that a few people asked. It's kind of a combo question. And I think that the segue, how I'll leave it there, is I think that if more developers and more gaming websites took that policy of, look, make your point, convince me, persuade me, and then we'll talk. You don't need an army of a bazillion people. This is not a numbers game. Persuade me. Because one of the things we learned when I worked in TV is that if one person cares enough about something to write a letter and they don't seem crazy, they speak for a significant number of people who probably felt the same way but couldn't be bothered to write a letter. And if somebody lays out the viewpoints, that's powerful. I know that on Twitch and on YouTube, a big challenge, and I've actually been asking, I've asked a couple people who do Spanish localizations in gaming how they handle this issue. And that was, I adopted the Latinx thing, trying to be sensitive. And then people who actually lived in places like, or came from places like Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, places like that are like, oh God, I hate that. That's not the way our language works. And I'm like, what? Tell me more. So now I say Latin people, Latin American people. Apparently, Brazilians do not consider themselves Latin. And ideally, they're Brazilian, they're Mexican, they're if they're a citizen of America or Canada, they're Canadian or American. But I don't say Latinx anymore because more of my viewers don't like it. And they had a valid reason, that they find it a desecration of their language. And the reason that stuck with me is if the whole idea of the use of the term Latinx is to make non-binary or gender fluid people from Central and South America more comfortable, while desecrating their language, in their opinion, isn't going to do that, right? And you notice I just said people from Central and South America. People who have Central or South American heritage. Problem solved. That's completely not gendered. Some French people said that it's impossible for them to not make gendered slurs in their language because everything in French is gendered, and fair point. This is something specific to English. And the other thing, the thing I'm segging in is Yosei, a long time commenter, Patreon backer, Kickstarter backer. Yosei's been around for a long time. He asked me to talk about the difference between, the general concept of an apology, the person-to-person dynamics, what I was talking about, and the idea of public figures apologizing, like I just talked about. And that segged into something a lot of other people commented on that apologies video. Only apologize if you mean it. And I thought I said that, but I guess I left it out because there were 6 or 7 comments of that nature. Yes, I am a big proponent of, I do not say I'm sorry to keep the peace. I say I'm sorry because I'm actually sorry. And the reason I do that is it's not about outcomes. You can't control what the other person does. So if I'm actually sorry I did something, I'll say it. And if the other person's an asshole about it, it's like, well, I don't care. That was my authentic feeling. It wasn't to get a desired outcome. It was just to do the right thing. It's amazing how much inner peace you get when you do the right thing. And I will give somebody credit. One person who totally botched their apology earlier in the week saw the video I made on Wednesday. It was not intended to dig at anybody. It was just sort of a general thing. But he took it to heart, and he came back, and he tried again, and he sent me a very nice message that was letter perfect. in terms of apology. And you know what? It worked. Things are good again. Amazing how that happens. Like, it was accountable and it was heartfelt and I believed he meant it. And amazing. That's going to be the thumbnail, eh? But yeah, apologies can be really super powerful. But in these culture war times we live in, I see why people wanted me to distinguish between public apologies and private ones. Because apologizing to one group in certain ways is going to piss off another. And the example one commenter gave was that they it's funny because I didn't talk about Odyssey. I talked about Unity and the apology on Assassin's Creed Unity, not the game design engine, the game. I talked about Assassin's Creed Unity and the fact that Ubisoft apologized after that. Another person pointed out that they didn't agree with them apologizing after the DLC controversy in Odyssey, where the playable character was forced into reproducing. And people that said they shouldn't have apologized because lore in the series means they must have descendants in order to tap into their DNA. There's also the fact that Spartans kind of separated sex and love as part of the culture. And Cassandra and Alexios were Spartan, are Spartan. Fictional characters are, even though they're in the past. But I was concerned, and this is where I get into my heavy, nerdy game design stuff that I love to talk about. I was concerned when Assassin's Creed pivoted to horror PGs that they were going to get into a problem in this regard, because the original experiment for Assassin's Creed was to minimize ludonarrative dissonance. So the idea is you're not a person in the past, you're a person playing a person in the past. And they started with sort of a bridge character named Desmond Miles in the first three games. Well, first three, but the second game was 3 parts. Assassin's Creed got really big. But the sort of Altair, Ezio, Connor, Edward with a side of Aveline, those focused on a character named Desmond, who was sort of like a genetic Rosetta Stone for the Assassins and the Templars. They eliminated that in 4 and had this like first person perspective in present day, and then third person perspective in the past, which I thought was kind of cool. You went into the Animus. Then in Unity, they made it that they were sort of crowdsourcing the research by marketing things as a game, which I thought was cute. So it was just end users, all like a wiki type thing. And then they sort of chucked it all and was just like, well, in Origins, they had the modern day ancestor, and in Odyssey, they sort of just like got rid of that all. And I think they were concerned that the lore, the meta lore in Assassin's Creed has now gotten so dense that people can't follow it. So they dropped that and they went in a completely new direction where you're just playing as Cassandra, or you're just playing as Alexia. So a little bit off the top where you select the character, but there's very little. And there's like the first Civ and all that stuff. It's really, really backgrounded. And I think it's just make a good game that people like. There's too much backstory to follow. But when they changed it to have more RPG elements instead of it just a straight up action thing, like, this already happened, you're trying to match what the historical character did. You can't impact the past because it's the past, it's already happened. Once they dumped out of that, they got into these problems of dissonance. And to me, what they were actually apologizing for is that mistake. It was actually a clash. It was the thing that the Assassin's Creed franchise set out to avoid in the first place, which was a clash between what the player thinks they should be able to do in a game and what they actually can do in the game. And so those RPG elements gave people the perception that they would have that kind of control over things. And then, like, whether somebody slept with any men or any women at all. And then they ended up being locked in to sort of a heteronormative paradigm. That is, I think, what Ubisoft was actually apologizing for, the design mistake, because I'm sure the teams, I've met some people who worked on that game, they'd be like, crap, we done fucked that up. Because that was precisely the design mistake I was afraid they'd end up going into when they adopted those RPG elements. And I really love that the teams that work on these games care. And I am not bullshitting this. I have actually, a while back, I confirmed that this was the experiment with these games. Obviously, the design direction has changed. They just, like, Black Flag forward. It's like, we're just going to make fun games that people like Yar Pirates, Yar Spartans. Let's recycle some For Honor assets. I didn't confirm that last part. That was a joke. But what I think they were actually apologizing for was that error, that lack of foresight when they made the pivot to RPGs. And I think they were actually sincerely sorry for that. They brought in a lot of new people who liked the RPG elements, and I thought they were smart to sort of swoop in and pick up the players that BioWare's horribly disappointed with things like Andromeda and Anthem and no new Dragon Age game on the horizon for a while. They were smart to exploit that hole in the market, and the fact that Cyberpunk is a different thing. It's not that sort of historical fantasy the way The Witcher was. There was a space for that game, but it had some unforeseen results, and I give them credit for going, yeah, this was not what we wanted. This was actually something we consider a mistake, and to me, I salute them for admitting that, because some developers get really defensive about that stuff. You could tell there's not perfect job security to Ubisoft, but better than the average studio because they're less reactive that way. But that's what I think was going on there, and that goes into the bigger point, which I said that especially if you're a public figure, only apologize for stuff you actually feel legitimately sorry for, because no matter what you do, somebody's going to be disappointed you didn't apologize. Someone's going to be disappointed that you did. It's all about the ethics and the morals, and I do use those words slightly differently. Ethics is your kind of code. Morality is how you interpret that code. That may be too esoteric for some people. That's okay. It's Friday. But ethics, you should disclose any conflicts or appearance of conflict. Morality is the case-by-case thing of, is this actually a conflict in my mind? That's what it is to me. I'm not saying it has to be for you. And that gets very tricky when you're making something as complicated as a game, or you're dealing with a group of people as diverse as gamers. And I've sort of had to decide who my people are within that this very large tent that is gaming. And I chose to pick, the middle between the two extremes of, if you don't think there's anything that needs to be improved, like, sorry, I disagree. If you want to shout people down and scream at people and just try to outrage and humiliate people into submission instead of change, sorry, this content isn't going to be for you. Everybody else who wants to know how to be a somewhat better person without being screamed at, welcome. Now that means extremists on both sides can't stand me. Like, they actually to this day continue to try to take me out in one way or another. If it's not Milo Yiannopoulos on the right, it's Hassan Piker on the left, and all their various and sundry compatriots. Like, it's just, it's this unending like grind. Fortunately, I'm a gamer. I know how to handle that. But that's a choice. It's a choice to know you are going to take hits because you're deciding to actually focus on strategies that work for people who care. You won't see me. I didn't apologize for that Mortal Kombat stuff because I didn't find anybody's argument compelling. I didn't. Maybe that's a mistake on my part. Maybe I'll feel differently in 6 months, but right now, no, I wasn't persuaded. I have apologized for other things because I felt it was warranted. I saw people's point, like when the Saints go marching in. I changed that, right? So, sorry about the bad memories. So I'll leave it there. That was a lot to chew on. Feedback Friday is like this. I am thinking, my question for you guys, if you've made it this far, I'm thinking of adding a just chatting stream to Twitch. I don't know if it's going to be monthly. I don't know if it's going to be weekly. Part of it is that Twitch monetization is just so much better. It's a better format for live streaming. And is this something you guys would be interested in? I mean, I love doing the retro games and all that stuff, but people are showing up for the chat. The game eventually kind of becomes, I was intense in my Sid Meier's Pirates dancing this week. I'm a hardcore Sid Meier's Pirates dancer. I watch those hand gestures like crazy. But most people, a lot of the regulars come for the chat and the discussion. So is there an interest in a just chatting stream added? And what day and time would work? Should I do it when the Feedback Fridays are happening? Should I do it like Friday at 1 sometime? So I do my pre-recorded video and then I do Twitch. Like, let me know. This is something I'm toying with because I have so much free time. But yeah, it's something that I think actually makes sense based on some of the feedback I've been getting. And this is the purpose of rewarding high quality comments and dealing with your feedback, because it actually does make this channel better. I get to know what you guys are interested in so I can provide you with that. That's capitalism. All right, everybody. Patreon. You should become a member. Patreon. Because YouTube doesn't give me money. Patreon. That was the best one yet at Patreon. Have a great weekend.